I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. No will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint, your host. With me today on this April 16th, 2014, is my weekly guest that I feel very fortunate and blessed, if you will, to have. Daniel, Christian name Daniel. Christian Remedy in Law is the YouTube channel. That's Christian Remedy in Law. You can certainly get a full afternoon's worth of details on that channel. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you, Clint. It's great being with you again.
Absolutely. And I seriously, absolutely. So I got an email today, and I wanted to start off the show today because, you know, it's a perfect segue into what we need to discuss today. The email said, basically a question for you that I was actually able to answer. He says, I have told several of my friends, about living life as basically a true Christian, as we talk about, giving up all of these things, these statuses, these personhoods. And he says that, you know, they reply because this is what you hear, this is what is parroted throughout the world of people who haven't actually read the Bible, and I include myself in that because this is one of the things I used to parrot, and now I know better. It says in the Bible, it says to give Caesar's things to Caesar and God's things to God's. And they claim that that means that you must be a part of the system. In other words, you must utilize the government things and separate your religion from the government is basically the way that a lot of people perceive this. Now, the actual verse in Matthew 22, to number 21, verse 21, is render unto Caesar the things, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things. Look at the full story, because this is very much, Daniel, in my opinion, like taking a court case, right? Supreme Court ruled today this, and this was its opinion. And everybody looks at the opinion, the winning opinion, and says, oh, well, this is great. All I have to do is take this little blurb from the court case, even though the court case is 100 pages long, and all of a sudden I have the whole complete picture of what that court case is. And I'm like, well, actually, there's also a dissenting opinion which has just as much validity, even though it wasn't the winning opinion. First of all, so you have two opinions on this, both of which could be used in court against you in your the next time you go to court. Well, same thing with the Bible. People take these single, and I include myself in this. I'm guilty as anyone, and I admit it. That's important for someone to be a quote-unquote truther. You take these single verses and you say, see, there's proof. There's proof. The Bible is corrupt and telling you this. No. What's corrupt is the parrot who squawked this and gave to people the wrong idea about what was actually happening during this story. Do you want to tell us what this was actually about and what this actually means? Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's.
Okay. First, we want to remember that Caesar's world works in fiction, works in the idea of value. does not work in the world of grace, works in the world of legal. Register the world is what Caesar said. Let's register the world. That was one translation. What we're dealing with is a situation of understanding the two sides. So when Christ was there, I mean, he's in a world that he said he was no part of. So he was not there to create anarchy on Caesar's world. He came there to rescue everybody. And he was going to be very clear and very truthful in any of the words that he used to let anybody know what the direction was for people that were going to go down a spiritual journey versus those that were going to end up on a non-spiritual or a secular journey. So when he said, render unto Caesar, now I'm going to bring your audience into the Noah Webster's 1828 definition of that. Noah Webster's 1828 definition of render is to yield or give up the command or possession of, to restore. Now, I want to take us into a very clear understanding of this. If I'm holding on to something that belongs to somebody else and I don't restore it to them, I could be in possibly a jeopardy of having to pay for its use.
Usury.
Because I'm holding it back. It's kind of like a robbery, a holdup. So, what people are not understanding why they fill out tax returns is because they keep on holding on to the tax portion of the name that belongs to Caesar, because they do not realize that their Christian name is not taxable by Caesar. It's exempt, immune. The surname, which does belong to Caesar, because it has Roman origins, it means debtor, which could have nothing to do with Christ, because Christ is dealing with people who have accepted the remedy of credit, not debt. And therefore, if we trespass on Caesar's property, why would not Christ say, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's? He's saying, restore that property to Caesar. He didn't say keep using it. He didn't say keep on toying with it, keep on holding it. But unfortunately, religious leaders have state-organized, body, corporate, pagan registration. And so, therefore, they've registered a religion under the Caesar side for using Caesar's money. So certainly if I talk to a pagan Protestant or Catholic or any of the other pagan religions under the Vatican, I know that in order to have a state-registered religion, I'm going to have to return on to Caesar what is Caesar's. And the word return is to bring back, because you're using something. But if you keep holding on to it, you're going to be continuously returning. It's almost like the old covenant with the Israelites, who had to keep on making sacrifice after sacrifice under tithing. So I've never found one single registered religion under the normal system that you and I have been probably exposed to. It wouldn't matter whether it's Mormon, Pentecostal, Jehovah's Witness, they're all registered pagan state religions who identify themselves as Christians under the cover of a pagan name. And of course, if I'm a pagan authority, you will pay me for the use of impostoring the following of Christ.
So it just boils down to pure usury, usufruct with a feat for use. I mean, that's really all we're talking about, and that includes our artificial person, our surname. Yeah, it's so simple, and yet it's so taken out of context. We'll get back. We'll just get into this a little more and then talk about how to get out of this mess. Stay tuned.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here is in your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this campus.
All right, folks, welcome back. My guest today is Daniel from YouTube channel Christian Remedy in Law. Now, I want to be clear, folks. What was happening in this allegory, in this story from the Bible, is a story. It's a full story. And so to take the quote, the simple quote, and demonize the character Jesus in that story by taking this simple quote, render unto Jesus the things that are Caesar's and unto God the things that are God's, folks, that's as ridiculous as, say, taking a movie star's quote from a movie and saying that he is corrupt as an actor. I mean, it's a stupid thing that I myself have done all my life until meeting people like Daniel here and studying the words that make up and actually going back and saying, okay, here's a quote. What's the context of the quote? Well, here is the context, folks. It's a brilliant story that we should all learn from, not demonize. Okay? Whether you believe in the Bible or not, this is the best advice you're ever going to hear. Listen to this. This is just from Wikipedia, by the way. It's nothing special. It's just a simple synopsis of what this Bible verse says. Okay? It says that hostile questioners tried to trap Jesus into taking an explicit and dangerous stand on whether Jews should or should not pay taxes to the Roman authorities. Okay? So in other words, they were trying to entrap the guy into basically breaking the law and into treason, if you will, to becoming a person. Remember, this guy Jesus is there as a pure, if you will, Christian. The Christ means the anointed. It wasn't his name. He was Jesus of Nazareth. The Christ meaning the anointed one. Okay, so here's the Christ standing there without government, without anyone ruling him except his God. The accounts in Matthew 22, 15 through 22, and Mark 12, 13 through 17 say that the questioners were Pharisees and Herodians. While Luke 20 through 26 says only that they were spies sent by the teachers of the law, in other words, lawyers, and the chief priests. They anticipated that Jesus would oppose the tax, as their purpose was to hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. In other words, he would say something that would get him in trouble. Too smart for that. The governor was Pilate. Pontius Pilate, and he was the man responsible for collecting the taxes in Roman Judea. At first, the questioners flattered Jesus by praising his integrity, impartiality, and devotion to the truth. Then they asked him whether or not it was right for Jews to pay taxes demanded by Caesar. In the Gospel of Mark, the additional provocative question is asked, should we pay or shouldn't we? Jesus first called them hypocrites, and then asked one of them to produce a Roman coin that would be suitable for paying Caesar's tax. One of them showed him a Roman coin, and he then asked them whose name and inscription were on it. They answered, why, Caesar's, of course. And he responded, no, it's government. And they answered, he responded, render, therefore, unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. In other words, hey, idiot, you're paying taxes with the money that says United States on it or Caesar on it. You fools, of course you're going to have to pay taxes because you're using someone else's things. Even in a private contract, you're going to have to pay for that service. Therefore, render that thing back onto the government where it belongs. Don't use it. Don't be a user and be submitted to usury. You know how important this piece of advice is coming from? I mean, the Bible, as I'm finding out, is chock full of this type of wisdom and knowledge. And I'm shocked at the fact that this type of fallacy is created by simply taking one line out of the Bible and saying, see, Jesus was corrupt, or whatever the current thing is. And then finally, the questioners were very impressed. Matthew 22 states that they marveled, and being satisfied with the answer, they went away. They couldn't entrap the man. There was no entrapping a man who understood what entrapment and usury was. He was not to have a part of it. And the lesson here, of course, as Daniel I'm sure agrees, is that none of you should be taking part in the Federal Reserve notes either. And therefore, really nothing that comes from government. As you said, Daniel, Caesar wanted to, what was it, register the world? So now we register our children?
World only meant secular. He couldn't register anything spiritual because it didn't belong to him. All man's governments are just made up nonsense to basically control a mob of people who have lost their spirituality from God. So therefore, what else am I going to do other than rope in an audience of unbelievers by getting them to use something that tags them as an unbeliever? So I give them all surnames, which relates to Caesar's property. Took a little bit of time to get it all in there. So we're in the 20th century with everybody using them exclusively without even a thought of what it is. Imprint people into believing they are something that they're not, and they will believe it. That's why the Catholic Church used to say that if they had an orphan child for the first 3 years of its life, the world could have it after that, because that child was so imprinted by Catholicism, it would never, ever know anything other than to agree with Catholicism. So what's happened is we've got a whole world that's been Romanized, paganized, fictionalized, and people are not understanding the time of Christ, what was going on prior. I know you and I had discussions dealing with the history of corporations, and incorporations go back to 250 BC, before Christ. And what happened at the time of Christ, because why would something that is of God need to go and become corporated or dead, become a dead body corporate, which is how every single legal thing you do in a day is operated by. You operating your spirit in a dead body corporate. You're preserving and supporting something that's dead. That's why Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. But unfortunately, people don't know this. So what was happening was the Christians who were following the pure beginning of Christ 3 to 4 centuries before the Roman Catholic pagan church got on the map. They didn't know what to do with this following because they wouldn't incorporate under the Roman jurisdiction. So they were throwing them into the Roman arenas to challenge them, to persecute them. And then they couldn't stop it. It was growing and growing. And then eventually, the Roman Catholic Church popped up, and they don't care whether or not the Protestants showed up in the 1600s of the Reformation. Why would they care, since they're going to keep on getting tithings and taxes for the use of the name that is Roman, that everybody's using, which is the surname, which represented someone who was nothing more than a evil one, a nickname, part of Satan, basically going to be roped in for tithe and tax.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I do want to ask you one question about what you said, but we'll have to wait until the break's over. Stay tuned, folks.
Living in the street. Oh, there's a solution. He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a problem with his poisons.
right, folks, welcome back. You're in the Corporation Nation. Now, I wanted to ask you, Daniel, I have a question about what you just said before the break, but first I wanted to there's a thing with me, and I know this is the same pet peeve with a lot of people out there. One of the reasons I was never able to come around, if you will, and actually look into the Bible, look into Scripture, and understand what I now understand today, mostly it's the language that is used by the, if you will, false Christians that are trying to spread the word of the fundamentalist version of the doctrines created by religions. Okay, words that are not dissimilar to one that you are using, which is believer or non-believer. And I want to, and it's not that it's a bad thing or a good thing, I just want to stress to people that these words actually all have specific meanings. So if I were to look and see what the words say unbelief in the dictionary, going back to 1828 again. Infidelity, disbelief of divine revelation. Incredulity, the withholding of belief. And it goes on. Unbelieve is to discredit, not to believe or trust. Well, folks, discredit is also another word you have to pick apart. What if you're discredited? Hey, that means you're not a creditor. What does that leave you to be? Well, if you're not a creditor, you're a debtor. Okay? What is to believe or trust? Again, a legal term. Where is your trust? Is it in man or is it in God? A trust is a financial instrument. This is why we put it on the dollar bill. In God we trust. Well, we is not us. We is our personhood. We is government. We is not anything natural. And God, as referred to on that dollar bill, is not the same God that we like to think it is. God is the man acting as God, government, basically. To be an unbeliever is an incredulous person, one who does not believe. An infidel, one who discredits revelation. Again, to discredit revelation creates you as a debtor of government, basically. To discredit revelation or the mission, character, and doctrines of Christ. This is very important to comprehend because, again, these words are what turns me off to listening to someone about the Bible. But I want people to understand these words are very important, but for the most part, they're spoken way out of context and without knowledge by the typical fundamentalist person who has grown up in a church environment without ever truly learning the true nature, I think, of the Bible. Am I too far off here, Daniel?
No, you're right on it, and I totally come from now a questioning, background. You and I both grew up in organized religion, and we may have just had maybe different, timings on things and what we experienced. But at the end of the day, we were both involved in what was considered to be state-organized religion. So we know that the state controls the media and what's said and what isn't said and what can be said because without controlling that, there is no possible way to keep a handle on fiction versus truth. So just to go back to the word belief, if you look at the word, the root of it, there's always words within words. So what I used to do, what I consider to be, I don't like using the word lectures, but I do these free hour sessions to 2-hour sessions at a lot of just cafes where there was no charge. It came out. It was just, what I had found and researched, and I wasn't putting anybody on the spot. And if they didn't like it, they could always walk out. There was no reason for them to have to take offense by it. If they don't like something, just turn it off. But what happened in those sessions, words like belief would come up, and I would tell people that there is a code in the English language, and many words are within words. So when you look at the word belief, It's got L-I-E-F. And if you look at the root L-I-E-F, you will find that it means love. So to have belief, you're really be-love. And God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever exercises faith in him may have everlasting life. Now, your Christian name, Christ, means love, because Christ loved his fellow man. He never raised arms against him. He was there. He felt that the populace at the time that he was involved in having to work his way through were like sheep without a shepherd. And he wept for them, it said in Scripture. He saw them as lost, and he needed to help them, to show them the way back to their spiritual, original allegiance to the Father. Now, when we look at, if we look very simply at the surname, okay, well, it means war. It does not mean love. So you can't have love and war without that kind of being a split allegiance between good and evil. And most of the supposed wars that have been fought have been, even at the blasphemy against Christ, fought in his name supposedly to go and shove the word of God down unbelieving people. But that's nothing that would lead back to the Scripture or lead back to the ways of Christ and anything that he preached. So he preached love, not war. And in fact, when he was being arrested for telling them what his faith, belief, and allegiance was, he never resisted them. And in fact, when one of his apostles even picked up a sword and cut the ear off of a Roman soldier, just consider him like a provincial or a state officer of the law, arresting a peaceful man who will not identify himself with a surname. He said, do not resist, because that was not the message. It was peace. Surprisingly, we have a system that even has the audacity at times to claim that an officer carrying a war name, an officer is always identified under his pagan, Roman, heathen surname, to identify him as a nation with no covenant with the true God as a Gentile, according to Samuel Johnson's definition of gentilitius, which means Gentile. He did not resist them, and he allowed himself to even be arraigned, even though he said, my kingdom is not of this world. But they would certainly see that as illegal, Clint. I spoke with a notary out of Toronto, and because I really don't feel it's probably his need right now to be exposed in that, because I know that he definitely knows that he has, or he knows that he has cooperated many times in truth, and his conscience is kicked in to help many Christians who come through his office. But he has stated very clearly that the Christian name or your given name is illegal in the world of the government that you operate under. It is illegal. You need a legal surname in order to be legal in their world, in order for them to gain jurisdiction to charge you under 4 million laws and statutes that they will write.
And there's another word, illegal, I think that is slightly, taken out of context or misunderstood. I mean, take the concept of an illegal alien. I mean, what does that mean exactly? I don't think anybody can quite define exactly what that means unless you realize that illegal just means it's some man that is not a registered person, right? I mean, that's...
You're completely correct, Clint.
Illegal simply means it's actually a good thing if you think about it from the perspective of being free. A bad thing from the perspective of not having any political rights. What is your preference? Being a free man or being a slave with certain protected political rights that can be taken away at any time because you're a slave or a person? Well, we'll be back, folks.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy. All our sensory systems. And then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like.
All right, folks.
Feels like.
Welcome back here in the Corporation Nation. Now, Daniel, I wanted to ask you in your a segment ago, you said something that put up a flag for me, and I wanted to just get clarification. Now, what it sounded like to me, and it makes sense if you think about the concept itself, is that the concept of incorporation, the veil of artificial clothing, if you will, created in Roman times, was created in the BC, and you basically were saying that in the BC, or the before Christ concept, that quote unquote Christians, if you will, were being persecuted before the Christ figure apparently appeared in the timeline, and that was an interesting. Am I getting that correct? I mean, it makes sense. Clint,
was that the premise for the fiction already knew what was coming, and it prepared itself to set up an idea of organized religion within its own idea of state or provincial authority at the time. And the Romans had provinces, so provinces are probably more of an accurate term than state, because the Romans divided everything into provinces, and that's why there's actually a lot more understanding where you find the British Empire, because even China has provinces. Wherever the British Empire has been, they divided things into provinces. But anyways, the idea of the control of religion that was within the jurisdiction of man's idea of government is what we're really dealing with. It had nothing to do with God. God doesn't need man to give God permission. So when Christ came, and they couldn't explain the miracles and all the things because he was doing things contrary or extraordinary to anything that any man can do. We don't find Christ as defined in any dictionary, whether Noah Webster's or Oxford, as a fictitious Zeus character. He's spoken of as someone actual and real who occurred on the planet. They give him even an approximate birth timeline that he showed up. You're dealing with, I think, people's misunderstanding of the power of God, and that man can only originate from the source of life, not from man's idea of government. So a clash happened. And man's unbelief in God, trying to say he'd work it out his own way, create his own government, his own rules, his own laws, would certainly not work well with something that would tell you to do everything peaceful, correct, true, not be involved with the chaos of man's organized government, stay away from it. And so therefore there was basically an act of God coming into play versus what we call act of man or act of fiction. And when act of God clashes with act of man, so say your given name, your God-given name, given by your parents as authorized by God from the beginning, comes into play and clashes with this idea that you need an additive name, a surname, not a real name, just a name that we can track you with. A name that's not necessary, but it appears to be like income, after acquired property that I can tax you on for using something that I'm going to label as a debt or a brand of debt. And if you touch it and you don't know that, I'm going to collect fees on it. Well, we call that act of God clause. And under an act of God clause, under insurance, it discharges the two parties from having to ever deal with one another. In other words, no one owes anybody anything. And we still have that to date in insurance policies, which are act of God clause. So you and I were born into a world that said, oh, welcome, Clint. You've just entered into the fictitious world of the Constitution of a bunch of fraudsters, pagans, called the Founding Fathers, connected to the Roman Catholic Church that they didn't want to disclose, and said, we'll constitute, make up a whole bunch of nonsense, because constitute means to make up. And in order to make something up, I'm going to have to make you believe it. So that's called make-believe. Not let you believe. I'm going to make you believe. Well, that's called magic. And, of course, the magi, the magistrates, enforce all that. So I'm sure you have many magistrates in the United States running all the magical use of the surnames because they want to make you believe that you're not your real name, your native name. Now remember, the scene where Christ was born was called the Nativity. Oh, could they possibly, Clint, have given you an alternative name, so they could tax you for using after-acquired property that wasn't yours? We'll call that income tax. They don't charge tax on outcome tax because out came you as Clint. But they would sure like to charge on Clint using after-acquired property, and they would bait you into using it, and the royal families of the world were very professional prostitute hookers because they knew how to put a bait on a hook, cast it on a line, offer you benefits and privileges, and reel you in. And then make you believe, it's called make-believe, that's force and duress, make-believe, that you are this. And that was the whole game of the Roman Catholic Church. They slaughtered people trying to make them believe that the Roman pontiff was the evidence of God on earth. Pure fraud.
Evidence of law.
And are going to reach their doom on Judgment Day.
Basically what you're saying is the Pope is evidence of law. God's law.
He's the evidence of fake debt.
Yeah.
For you not believing in God. Because
I still can't get. Sorry, I still can't get over the word belief is such an interesting concept because it doesn't necessarily mean just blind, faith like we're supposed to grasp as doctrinal, in the doctrinal church. It's really belief is more of a recognition of something as opposed to just a blind It's hard to put into words, isn't it?
Well, I'll put it kind of simply in a one of the free discourses I did. I used to explain belief, and the Bible would say that love believes all things. And we already discussed that leaf is love, so belief is be love. So it says love believes all things, endures all things. And I started to realize what that was about, because in essence, if someone says, let's just say someone says, Dan's just a rotten guy. Believe me, I could give you a list. Because they don't like this knowledge. And especially coming from the religious faction. Because I'm ruining what they're trying to propagate as truth, which is really fiction. They make money on lies, not on truth. And I would say to them, love believes all things. Well, yes, I believe they believe what they believe, but it doesn't mean that I actually believe in what they believe. I just know they believe it.
Doesn't make it real, doesn't make... All right, well, we're going to go to our long break here. Stay with us here on RBN. We'll be back.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men. Machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint, your host, and my guest today is Daniel from Christian Remedy and Law. That's on YouTube. That's Christian Remedy and Law. If you type that in, you'll find all of Daniel's many, many videos explaining some of the stuff we're talking about today in much more detail. Now, Daniel, we're kind of talking there on the break, and interesting that we had the same experience. Now, when you start... And I don't want to say this, I don't know how to say this without, I'll just say it. When you start to make a difference, when you start to grasp reality and grasp the things we're talking about, suddenly people approach you. For instance, in my case, people want to suddenly write things on my blog. Now, when I started my blog, I would get 2 or 3 hits a day. Now I get between 500 and sometimes if it's a article that gets spread around, I'll get up to 15,000 in a day.
Oh.
If I'm fortunate enough to land on somewhere like Rents or somewhere else. Generally, it's 500 or 600, 700 a day that are hitting my blog. All of a sudden, people want to be a part of my blog. I've never advertised. I've never asked for sponsors or wanted sponsors. It's my own personal space that I put all my research and research I want to share with people. That's it. So all these people now are sending me emails saying, hey, I want to write for you. I want you to link this. I'll trade you advertising this for that. I always say no. No matter who it is or what it is, the answer is no. This is my personal thing. I don't want it to be corrupted in any way, shape, or form. Now, on that note, I was telling Daniel something that someone that approached me. I'm not going to say I don't know or I can't say I don't trust this person that approached me, but basically I got a phone call and it was someone trying to get me to do something that goes completely against what I've been learning, which was basically to tempt me into forming a trust, which is basically a trust that, from what I understand, it's a bunch of wealthy people or people who are suddenly making a difference, like Daniel and myself, I guess, who are actually getting to people. And so I was offered basically the keys to this hidden knowledge where bankers, lawyers, attorneys, whatever, they all do this trick where they create a trust, basically. And that trust is it's a trust that controls the name, the surname. So it's like a non-profit corporation that controls the for-profit name corporation. And in that regard, I was sent some forms and stuff that you can actually go and say, hey, IRS, because I'm a non-profit trust that controls the for-profit corporation, that is my name, the government's name, I am claiming basically all my expenses and taxes back. And at the time, I'm like, wow, that sounds great. And all it took was just a couple minutes after the sales pitch was over to realize, hey, there's something very wrong with this, because instead of getting out of the system, it's putting you deeper in the system. Now, what was your experience with this similar offer, Daniel?
Well, I know that I had been in the office of a charitable law firm that writes the law for the province of Ontario, at least consults with them. They're called Carter and Associates. One of their main guys is Terrence Carter. He's the head warlock. Because these guys are all devils of darkness, and I want to make something very clear right now. I am no friend of any lawyer. I am a friend of a lawyer who wants to convert to Christianity, but not anybody who is a lawyer, because lawyers are sworn an oath to the devil. And people don't know that. They think that's just some weirded out, strange title that they've been given, devil's advocate. They even have a bar in downtown Toronto that was called the Devil's Advocate. And they had a picture of a lawyer with an old British wig and a serpent's tail and a pitchfork in front. I don't think I'd be an invited member to have a drink with them. Because when you're called to the bar as a lawyer, you must deny Jesus Christ. And you must say that you will lead every man, woman, and child who is part of the unbelieving G20 nations into the hands of the Pope, where you require to give tithing and tax because you will not accept Christ who wiped out your debt. And so this is a very, very difficult thing for most people to comprehend, because they say, oh, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Hindu, I'm this, I'm that. Well, let me tell you that the Jesuit order of the Catholic Church has basically created all those religions. There isn't a single religion under that unholy Roman Empire that they don't control, because they're all state-registered religions that lead right back up to the Vatican. So if you look in the Concise Law Dictionary, Osborne, 7th edition, under Devil's Own, it's called the Devil's Own, and here is the definition. The in-of-court regiment of the Territorial Army, recruited primarily from the members of the legal profession. It obtained its nickname. Nick means evil one. So it obtained its evil one name, which is the same as a surname, from George III at a review in Hyde Park in 1803. By 1584, the benchers and members of the Inns of Court had formed armed, all about surnames, armed associations to serve and protect the Queen Elizabeth I. These people are 100% unbelieving pagans, masking the idea from the time that they tried to overthrow the early Christian believers who were following Christ and created corporations that Christ had already told would come in. It said there'll be wolves enter in among and will pervert his teaching. He prophesied this way in advance. So what's happening right now is we're seeing history unfolded, but most people have been caught up not seeing it. And so I want everybody understanding or listening on this radio show is your lawyer is not your friend. He is an enemy, serpent, bad energy. He would sell you out for absolutely nothing more than 1 cent if he could. He has no at all concern for you. He is in the bad side. His side only is based on swearing an oath that there is no remedy, there is no Lord's Prayer, there is no remedy, God's kingdom coming, there is no Christ, because in the event Christ is pretty
that was loud. We'll take a break here. I would say the same thing about politicians and stockbrokers as well, who will make money no matter what. Stay tuned, folks.
Is this real, or is this just rhyme? The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. Up and down, round and round, and it's very loud.
All right, folks, welcome back. You're in the Corporation Nation, and we are talking with Daniel today. Christian Remedy in Law is the YouTube channel. So, Daniel, let's get into this. We keep saying we're going to, and we keep getting into these deep conversations.
No.
Now, you are in the... What's that?
I said I'm sorry about that. It's hard because I think we have a controlled amount of time. It's difficult. I know our listeners want us to get into the meat and the potatoes.
I know. I understand. Trust me. Putting up with these commercials is often very tough as well. Sometimes breaks up the continuity, if you will. So let's talk about your process. Now, you've, of course, spent many years, way more than me, studying and coming to a comprehension understanding of all this that we've been talking about for the last couple of months here. What is the process? What is the remedy? What is the solution? This is the big question that everybody wants to know.
Okay. We had the beginning of the discussion. I think today we were dealing with render unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Absolutely.
And Jesus had been very clear in Luke 14:33 that you had to forsake all in order to be his disciple. And I had to look up that word forsake, and it led to the word relinquish. Looked it up in the Canadian Law Dictionary, and it was to yield up, to give up possession of. And he said all. And then I looked up what all meant in law, because it was very important to understand that. And so if we take Black's Law Dictionary and we look at it under the definition of all, it says the whole number or sum used collectively. Now, collectively is used as enforcing an amount owed on a judgment. So we have to understand when you're talking about, like, someone's a collection agency, they're collecting on debt. So when you're in the collective, that means there's always an amount being charged or collected. Now, that's completely opposite to grace, which is the opposite to legal. Because free grace in Noah Webster's, if you look under the word legal, it says legal is contrary to free grace, which means it's the opposite. You might as well say it's the antonym. So if I take the word legal and go to opposite, I'd say that's illegal. So it's illegal in the legal world to be a Christian because there's no money to be made if you're legal. If you're illegal, if you're grace, you have no profit for anybody. You can be a prophet, but you can't profit. You can be a prophet of the Bible, tell the truth, but you're not profitable to men. So under all, when he said you must forsake all, I got a better understanding when I looked it up in Black's. It says every member of individual component of, each one of, used with a plural noun. In this sense, now a plural noun would be your surname because you don't have the whole control of the family name you use. So that's a plural noun. And it says, all refers rather to the aggregate under which the individuals are subsumed than to the individual themselves. So when you join the aggregate, so when Clint becomes Richardson, no longer does Clint exist. Clint's been wiped out, and all they see is Mr. Richardson.
And like you say, on a soldier's uniform, they really only put the surname with only the initial of the first name.
That's right, because you've given up all your unalienable, God-given rights that we talk about many times. What are the unalienable rights of people? The right to believe, many things. But when you join into an aggregate, what are the rules of the aggregate is more the concern. Well, if the aggregate works contrary to what the God-given position is, you must surrender that in order to join into the aggregate. So when Jesus said one must forsake all, he says you can't be part of the commoners, the people that are prostitutes who sell themselves for money. You have to be there under a completely separate jurisdiction of no mammon, no gain, no monetary profit. You have to be there for love. And you'll be an ambassador of goodwill from God. And the world can't touch you because you're not of the world.
Well, this brings up an important concept here because really what we've done, I think everybody understands this from our past talks and my past shows. What we've done is register everything as an artificial thing. And so I think the biggest question or misunderstanding, and you know, includes myself, is how do we unregister, I guess would be the correct way of putting it. How do you unregister? How do you, I mean, some people have even gone so far as to ask me, well, if I do this, am I going to have to give up my house? Am I going to have to give up my kid? I mean, what am I going to have to do to get out of this? Because I've already registered this thing we call property to the government. So what's the key to unregistering, I guess, is the...
No, we're right on the tooth, Clint. What's great about this is we're live and we're on the air and we're on the nerve of the tooth.
Yeah.
What does someone do? So if I have something that is yours, okay? Let's just look at it that you're contrary to me. And you've allowed me to use something that's completely yours, but there's under terms and conditions. And I don't want to be part of it anymore. What would be the logical thing to do? Well, I would have to possibly, in all logic, give back what's not mine. If I don't want to be under any constraints that has to do with something that belongs to another, I'd have to hand it back.
You'd have to stop using it.
Right. And it would only be only understood that if I have spent my entire life using property under license. Now, we know that many of the listeners have a license. and I'm not there to condemn them. Many of them don't even understand that license comes from licentious, which means kind of like a go-ahead liberty to do something bad. It does not have a good meaning behind it. So when I use something under license, it means someone's giving me permission to use something that's theirs under terms and conditions. You do not need a license to be who you are. But if who you are is using the name of somebody else that has a registered lien on it, now we're welcoming ourselves to the fraud of the lawyers. The lawyers on majority don't even know this because most of them have an acumen less than possibly someone with a grade 1 education.
All right, well, let's pause there. We'll take a break and come back with more of this. Stay tuned, folks.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn, Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind?
All right, folks, welcome back. You're in the Corporation Nation. If you'd like to join the chat room, which is pretty lively today, go to corporationnation.chitango.com. Question for you, Daniel, coming from the chat room. It's a very simple question, and it's an unfortunate one because it's hard to live without. The question is, are you still using Federal Reserve notes? And of course, you're in Canada, which would just translate to the euro, I suppose, up there. Are you still using government money?
Okay, here's where the problem comes with most of the people that are out there. One thing I'm not deceived on, anything that has ever been used, purchased, or moved with what is considered to be ready money, that's what cash is, issued by the Federal Reserve, signed by people that are not you or me, which would tell me that I've already proven those are checks. By the way, Clint, I had a government office in Ontario identify the cash Canadian Bank of Canada money as checks. Did you know that?
Define check.
I'm not even going to define check. I'm going to just say that they said that when I put down, they asked me who to make out a receipt to when I handed them Bank of Canada money, which is like, let's just say $20 bills, okay, for an amount that was required at a government administrative office to do something that was required under the idea of being part of Canada. And when I gave them the money, now I had been in there before and given them the cash, and they checked off on the receipt that it was paid by cash, because I would give them generally a name in the past as what I would have worked under. But when I put down cash care of Bank of Canada, now wouldn't that be accurate that I gave them cash care of Bank of Canada, Clint? When I was paying for something? I don't print the money in my basement, do you?
No comment.
Okay, so I gave them money that was in my hand, and it came from the Bank of Canada, so I handed it to them. Now, they had many categories on the receipt. They said, who do you want the receipt made out to? Now, in the past, I'd given them cash and gave them a normal standard name, because I did things on behalf of other people even that were going to this government office to pay by cash. So when they checked off the boxes, there was certain categories. One was cash, one was Visa, one was MasterCard, one was basically debit, and one was check. Now, when I gave cash and just gave a regular, I'm just going to call it a social insurance registration name. We'll just call it a John Smith or a John Doe. They checked off that it was paid by cash.
In other words, when you were acting in person, it was considered a cash transaction.
Right. But when I put down cash care of, that means in trust of, the Bank of Canada, they put down, I paid by check.
Where
now,
did you write this? Cash care.
We'll have to show the evidence of this because we know there's going to be a few doubting Thomases out there. But we have the proof of it. And I don't print the invoices that came out of this office. I have them to prove what I'm saying. And I'll send them to you because we just came up with this by chance in this interview. But we'll send it to you because truth does not hide anything. So we will do full disclosure to Clint on his site, and whatever you need to do to put it out there, we can prove this. But, okay, when I put down that I went in there and I said, my Christian name is Daniel. They had a small box at the bottom. They didn't check off any of the boxes. You know what they checked off as a box when I actually tried to pay with Federal Reserve notes?
Lunatic fringe? Lunatic fringe?
You know what they said? They put down and they checked off. They said recommended for refund.
Huh.
Because they can't charge a Christian, but they can sure charge a stupid pagan.
Interesting.
I hope I was not too unclear about that.
Well,
the lawyers know what I'm talking about at the top end, Clint.
Sure.
Majority of the lawyers down below, even the lawyers at the top wouldn't have those lawyers sweep their floors because they don't know anything.
Well, let's go back to. I get what you're saying, definitely. In other words, money is cash, whatever you want to call the note. Money is under the law of necessity, if you will, which technically is under the natural law, the law of nature, if you will. Law of necessity says, hey, if you're going to starve, it's necessary to do whatever it is that you don't starve. Okay, you can't have a real moral obligation when it comes to this type of thing. If someone is hoarding and you have nothing and you're going to die from hunger, I'm sorry to say, that's unfortunately, well, you get the picture. So I guess the question was probably designed more of as a, do you use government money? More designed as a, probably not intentionally, but as a fallacious attack, more than it was, how do we bypass government money? Are you saying that it's not a necessity to not use the government's script, copyrighted script, or are you saying something else?
Okay, well, I'd say probably if you're going down the absolute journey as Christ spoke, which says go with no script in your wallet, okay, then you're walking strictly as a believer in Christ. And they can't charge you. You can't charge something that is not part of a jurisdiction to be charged. But if you cross the line and take the bait and don't realize what the scripture is all about, that Christ blotted out all the charges, well, then you're going to walk with the illusionary surname that everybody has had put over their head. And that's called a surcharge. I call it like an overcharge. I call it the overhead. You can't run a corporation without seed capital and overhead. So they use the seed capital of Abraham, and they convince them to believe they have an overhead charge under the Gentiles. So therefore, seed capital, overhead. Check the definitions out in the law. Check out the definitions in the dictionary. But in the event that I'm of a jurisdiction that cannot be charged, consider me an ambassador of goodwill, good faith, not bad faith. And I'm not here to go and claim money, profit, wealth, everything that was completely opposite to the message of Christ. Adam was not born on the earth with wallets and pockets and money and any of those nonsense things that man would like to think is necessary right now.
Well, let me ask you. Sorry, let me ask you this, I guess, to make it clear. Would it be safe to assume that, I guess the philosophy here is that a piece of paper is just a piece of paper? Now, depending on who's using that piece of paper, how they're registering their use of that piece of paper, that's what makes the paper have quote-unquote legal jurisdiction, authority, and all of that. But if you're just, using, one of the comments here is cash is king. If you're just using that piece of paper as a means of barter and not necessarily paying attention to all the rules and regulations behind it, I guess that makes it just like trading seashells or anything else. Is that the correct assumption?
Well, it is correct. And basically, if you're using someone else's check, own whatever you bought.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be back. Just a little bit of time left. But we're going to address one of the comments in the chat room. Stay tuned, folks.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion despite protests and clashes in Athens streets. The IMF imposed structurally unjust.
All right, folks, welcome back.
In fact, the term economy entered our language from the Greek.
Oh, a little juice news there. Always liked the juice news rapper guy. It's pretty fun. So Daniel, the comment has been made. The gauntlet has been thrown out here, basically, by your brother in arms here, saying that what Daniel has done in the last week, basically to be completely out of the secular world. People are curious. Inquiring minds want to know. They also want to know whether this is applicable in the United States, and I'm sure it is. Now, I want to make the point here before you start to say that this is not Daniel's remedy. Again, we're talking about Christian remedy. In other words, this is laid out in the Bible, and that's why the Bible is so important. So what you have done is you've put the pieces together and have figured out how to utilize the information in the Bible as your guidepost, basically. Again, inquiring minds want to know here.
Okay. When Christ said his kingdom is no part of this world, clearly, how could anybody be a Christian and be a participant, because part is participant in? So I knew that I could not be in. It may have been my parents were in, maybe other people that I was associated in my mentoring in life were in. It has nothing to do with that. It's an individual journey. An individual in law is not a member of a Roman family in definition. So it means you're just one, not two, not a compound name, not a given name with a surname to make it a compound, a prisoner name, because that's what compounds are, prisoners. So if you want to imprison your given name in being surety or guarantor for the surname, you're in. And that's as simple as that. And therefore, you're secular, not spiritual. And don't expect the government, the court, the law system, or anything else to identify you or have any recognition of you any other way.
Yeah, they're not going to help you. There are no forms. There's nothing. There's nothing that they're going to offer you to fill out to basically excuse yourself from their power and authority.
Right. The only thing you can do is to let them know, because if you're removing what you do have, in other words, if you don't have something in there, if you don't have a stake, Clint, if you don't have a stake in it, well, then you just be a robot anyway. So what's the point of even having any discussion of any of the things we're talking about? If there was nothing that you had individually involved in the participation being in whatever we're involved in, if you did not have something separate from that, how could possibly you have any individual control or position or decision? Now, a surname is common. You don't have full control of it. A surname is something used by many people. You're just one participant using that. What happens if the use of that surname has a registered lien on it for usage under copyright, and you're using it? Wouldn't that kind of bring into being or into thought that you have a debt attached to it, which would relate to the fact that the word surname, nomen, meant debtor in the Roman law? So if I attach what I've been graced or given as a gift from God, my parents bestow upon me a name, it appears no debt with the given name, that's unalienable. There isn't a lawyer, a judge, a president, a queen, a dictator who has any right over your given name. It's yours. But if you'd like to attach yourself, to identify yourself with something that attaches into their system, well, that would make sense since their system is artificial. And they need an artificial name, an additive name, a surname that goes back to the Romans, even back to the Chinese, because the first one was by hilarity, F-U, who. So that makes total sense that the original one I could find in a expose dealing with surnames was F-U. And I kind of believe that's exactly what it represents, is the F-U. I hope I didn't violate the CRTC rules of communication here.
Well, so again, the question, because we understand this. The question is, how are you relinquishing? How are you getting?
You relinquish it. If I'm relinquishing it and I'm not using it and I'm not part of it, and we've been to federal government offices that said, if you don't have a Social Security or a social insurance registration, which means you attaching yourself to that surname to create an identity number to track that, and you don't operate under that, you don't pay any tax. They told us that directly. There was no, but if you want to take the benefits of it, you would have to subscribe to that name, and to subscribe is to be below a scribe or a lawyer.
Well, this makes it sound like you have a choice. Most people don't really feel like there's a choice. In other words, we're already in it. We're already subscribed. Almost everybody that's listening is a quote-unquote citizen with a Social Security number and all that. So the problem is not that we have we're not facing a choice of whether to accept or not to accept. We've already accepted. So the question, I'll tell you what, Daniel, are you busy this Friday, 2 days from now?
Busy this Friday, and I will be available because I really like to complete this journey.
Okay. Yeah, because I want to invite you back on Friday to finish this conversation, because right now the sentiment is that the answer is still eluding us, and I want people to really understand that we have not built this up to the point where we are now just to disappoint, because I believe that you are on the right track. So I want to correct that sentiment. So
I want to let you know, just to let you know, the nerve on the tooth is so sensitive right now on this. There is a young man with his faith right now sitting inside incarceration, inside an Ontario prison, who has been fraudulently induced to commit fraud to use the surname by provincial officers of the Ontario Provincial Police to say that he has a surname. He's sitting in prison under his Christian name, Dylan John, because they wish to induce him to commit fraud so they can place charges, liens, and encumbrances on him and violate his God-given unalienable rights that have nothing to do with their pagan nation of Canada. And the officer is Officer McGuire, who is literally threatened, induced, and committed fraud already and has committed atrocity. But this is the turning the steam up on Daniel, not on anybody else. It's on Christian named Daniel, because when I preach and I teach, they go to the weakest links out there. So you will find anybody who's listening to this information and starts to connect on it, their freedom is awaiting them. It's the unfortunate bad side with the lawyers, the bankers, the politicians, and those that are Satanists. And they do not wish you to be of God.
all right, well, we're coming to the end real quick here. Music's going to play, and you know what that means. So you agree to come back on Friday and really hammer this out? All right, same time, same bat channel, and we will continue this conversation on Friday. Again, I thank you, despite what some people might be thinking, you've really uncovered a huge can of worms here. You've literally described and defined things not only in the Bible but in the law that have really, woken me up personally, and I hope that this is the case with my listeners as well. So join us, folks, on Friday for a special edition with Daniel, and we'll really hammer this out, because the gauntlet has been thrown down, and the claim has been made that you're out of the secular world, and people are dying to know what the heck's going on. So again, I appreciate it, Daniel, and we will see you on Friday. Thanks, folks. Thanks to the chat room. Peace be with you. God bless. Take care.